Now that Super Bowl 56 is in the books, all everybody's talking about is whether Matthew Stafford is a Hall of Famer or not. And that is a very interesting discussion, but I actually wanted to give some recognition to the other Matt that has been extremely underrated throughout their career, the other Matt that has a very strong Hall of Fame case, and the other Matt that has been playing in the league since before 2010. Today, I'm going to debate the Matt Ryan Hall of Fame case and tell you if Matt Ryan belongs in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Matt Ryan's career accolades before we begin anything else. So, Matt Ryan is a 5-time Pro Bowler, technically. Now, in a lot of places, it does say he's a 4-time Pro Bowler. He was invited to 5 Pro Bowls, just he declined the invitation in 2018. So, technically, he's 4, but they do take that into account for the Hall of Fame. I've looked it up. So, Matt Ryan technically is a 5-time Pro Bowler. He is a 1-time first-team All-Pro. He was the 2016 NFL MVP. He was the 2016 NFL Offensive Player of the Year. He won the 2008 Offensive Rookie of the Year. He led the NFL in passer rating once, led the NFL in completion percentage once, led the NFL in yards per attempt once, led the NFL in completions twice, led the NFL in game-winning drives twice, led the NFL in fourth-quarter comebacks twice, and has the most consecutive games in NFL history with 200-plus passing yards. Some pretty impressive stuff here. I don't know if I would regard this as quite the top of the top in terms of Hall of Fame, but it's certainly a resume that you would expect from the bare minimum of a Hall of Famer, which Ryan has certainly done. He's led the league in multiple statistical categories, got several awards and honors to his name, and he even has an NFL record on his accolades list. Fair or not, quarterbacks are always judged upon how much or how little that they win throughout their careers. And this is certainly something that goes into the criteria for being a Hall of Famer. Now, Matt Ryan, he's never won a Super Bowl, but in terms of just regular season winning, he's done it at a pretty impressive rate. He's 120 and 102 in the regular season, which is about a 54% win percentage. Not great, but not bad. 120 wins, which is 11th all-time. That is impressive. 3 division titles. He has 3 first-round byes in his career. He has won 12-plus games twice throughout his career, and he's won double-digit games, 10-plus games, 6 times. He has 7 winning seasons. He is 5th in wins since entering the NFL in 2008. He has the most wins of any quarterback in their first 5 seasons ever, and he is the only Falcons quarterback with back-to-back winning seasons in franchise history. So that on the surface is impressive for Matt Ryan. He's basically broken every Falcons franchise win record. He has the most wins in his first 5 seasons in the league of anybody in league history, and he ranks high in wins since entering the league, and he has a fairly impressive overall career total when it comes to wins. But what Hall of Fame players do is they often transcend organizations and change kind of the kind of direction that the organization's going and how they're perceived and the success that they experience. So the 14 years before Matt Ryan for the Falcons, so from 1994 to 2007, the Falcons had 4 winning seasons before Matt Ryan in 14 years. They were 23rd in the NFL in wins in this span from 1994 to 2007, as you can see. But among teams that were non-expansion teams, they were 6th worst in the NFL, 100, 123, and 1. Not very successful. Now, they did make a Super Bowl in 1998, and they did make the conference title game in 2004. Had a couple good years with Michael Vick, But overall, the Falcons were not a very good franchise before Matt Ryan. They were one of the worst franchises in the NFL. And you look at how Matt Ryan changed the Falcons from during his 14 years with the team. From 2008 to 2021, the Falcons have made the playoffs 6 times. They have had 7 winning seasons with Matt Ryan, and they are tied for 12th in wins since Matt Ryan entered the league. They've made it to a Super Bowl. They've made it to multiple conference title game appearances. They've made the playoffs a lot. The Falcons have been a very successful organization with Matt Ryan, relatively speaking, to the rest of their history. Matt Ryan has given the Falcons the best run in team history. The first decade of his career was the best run in Falcons history. It really was. So when you look at the ability to change an organization, Matt Ryan's done that. He did that to Atlanta. He made them one of the worst franchises in the league to actually an above-average franchise since Matt Ryan entered the league. And that right there is certainly something that Hall of Fame level players do. Now, of course, statistics obviously matter when it comes to the Hall of Fame, and Matt Ryan has certainly put up some very impressive career statistics. Through his first 14 seasons, he has thrown for 59,735 yards, which is 8th all-time, 367 touchdowns, which is 9th all-time. He has a 94.2 passer rating, which is 13th all-time. He's completing about 65.5% of his passes, which is 10th all-time. He has a yards per attempt of about 7.5, which is tied for 29th all-time. He has 33 fourth-quarter comebacks, which is tied for 7th of all time, as is his game-winning drive total, which is 42, also tied for 7th all time. Some very impressive numbers here, but we also have to factor in the fact that Matt Ryan's career is not over. Matt Ryan is still, capable of playing for 3-4 more seasons and having a couple more productive seasons in him. That's not unrealistic at all, given how old quarterbacks are playing at this point in the NFL. So, like, Tom Brady just led the league in yards and touchdowns at, 44 years old? Now, I'm not saying Matt Ryan's Tom Brady, but it's certainly in play that Matt Ryan plays another 3 years and has a couple more productive years. So when we look at, let's assume Matt Ryan plays 3 more years. Let's assume he has 3 more fairly productive years. So by the end of his career, Matt Ryan will have thrown for 72,428 yards, which would put him 3rd all time, just behind Tom Brady and Drew Brees. He will have thrown for 433 touchdowns of all time, which would put him 6th. He will have had 37 fourth-quarter comebacks, which would put him 5th all-time, and 48 game-winning drives, which would put him 6th all-time. Very, very impressive career numbers. And through 17 years, he would certainly have that longevity check to get into the Hall of Fame, which is certainly something the Hall of Fame considers. He'd have very, very impressive career statistics and certainly would be worthy of consideration for Canton due to this. Something that I've really heard a lot throughout the Hall of Fame debates and just through Hall of Fame debates in general throughout the NFL is dominance in era, which certainly matters. There's no doubt about this. You need to be one of the better players at your position throughout an extended period of time during your era to get consideration for the Hall of Fame. And that certainly is the case with quarterbacks today. I do think, though, that people overrate how important this actually is. Now, Ryan has, of course, checked this box as well, which I will get to. But when we look at active Hall of Fame quarterbacks throughout the NFL's history, there have been at least 8 Hall of Fame quarterbacks active for a lot of the time. We've seen it throughout NFL history quite commonly. And as early as, the early 1970s, there were as many as 11 active Hall of Fame quarterbacks in the NFL. So there is no limit to how many Hall of Fame quarterbacks there can be at a certain time. If a player is worthy of being in Canton, they will be enshrined regardless of era. Now, let's also keep in mind that Matt Ryan has played in the era that has contained the best quarterback play of all time with some of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, rivaling him every single season in statistics. And I kind of nicknamed these four guys the prolific four because they've been the four quarterbacks that have defined the era. Tom Brady is regarded as the greatest quarterback ever, and he has the most championships. Personally, I think Peyton's second, and he has the most MVPs. Rodgers is regarded as the most talented of all time. Breeze may very well have the best statistics of all time. Ryan should not be punished for playing in an era with these four guys, and the higher he ranks statistically is actually more impressive considering he's competing against all of these legends. And this is not even including some of the other awesome quarterbacks that have been in Ryan's era, such as Ben Roethlisberger, Russell Wilson, Cam Newton, Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers, even recently Patrick Mahomes and Matthew Stafford. All of these guys have been competing with Ryan for statistics. So Ryan consistently ranking highly in statistics makes it all the more impressive because he's played in the best era of all time when it comes to quarterbacks. For his era, Ryan will fall behind Peyton, Rodgers, Breeze, Brady, Wilson, and Roethlisberger most likely in terms of getting into the Hall of Fame. But outside of that, Ryan may actually be your best bet to get into the Hall. His biggest competition in regards to that would probably be Phillip Rivers, Matthew Stafford, and Eli Manning. In terms of seasons that I believe Matt Ryan was a top 10 or top 5 quarterback, and this is obviously important because a lot of people look at this, I believe Matt Ryan was a top 10 quarterback in 8 different seasons. 2008 was his rookie season. He won Offensive Rookie of the Year. He had one of the most efficient rookie seasons of all time. Just look at his efficiency stats. They're insane. And he led the Falcons to the playoffs. He was a top 10 quarterback of that season. In 2010, he made the Pro Bowl. He led the Falcons to 13 wins. He was a top 10 quarterback of that season. In 2011, he had a very good statistical season. He led the Falcons once again to the playoffs. He hadn't had great defensive support this season. So Ryan, I think these 3 seasons kind of early in his career, he wasn't quite as consistent as he would become in later seasons, but he was showing flashes of that, and he was certainly top 10 in these seasons. 2012 was an elite season for him. He was elite that year. He was a top 5 quarterback in football. Outside of one really awful game against Arizona, he may have won MVP that season. He was that good. He was certainly top 10. He was top 5 pretty handily, I would say. 2014, this was not a good year for the Falcons in general because, the defense was really bad and the run game was very bad. And it was a lot on Ryan to carry the team. And the team wasn't great, but Ryan had a very good individual year, and the Falcons were also unlucky to lose a lot of close games that were not Ryan's fault in this season. Obviously, 2016, he was arguably the best quarterback in the league. He won MVP, top 10, top 5, all that great stuff. 2017 is a season that I think Matt Ryan is really underrated in because he had a lot of interception this season, 12 to be exact. But, it wasn't as bad as it looked. Like, when you look at the interceptions that Ryan was throwing, a lot of them were at fault of the receivers this season. It was not really on Matt Ryan for these interception problems. When you actually look at turnover-worthy play percentage, Matt Ryan had the lowest turnover-worthy play percentage in the NFL in 2017, according to Pro Football Focus. It was at 1%. He was graded as very highly this season. And overall, he played well this season. If you just look at all of the efficiency metrics I'm about to show you, he played well this year. It just wasn't quite the volume it had been with Shanahan, and it was also just an unlucky season for Ryan and the Falcons in general. And then 2018, he was once again elite. I believe he was top 5. He threw 35 touchdowns, 4,900 yards, had a 108 rating, carried the Falcons to 7 wins, and the Falcons were honestly unlucky to lose a lot of close games that season, even with a lot of injuries, and they could have made the playoffs had a couple plays gone their way, and that was mostly due to Ryan. He was outstanding that season. In my opinion, he was a top 5 quarterback. So I think when you look at the stretches here, that 2016 to 2018 stretch specifically is where I think Ryan legitimately, in that full 3-season stretch, you could argue statistically was the best quarterback in the league, which I will get to, and he played to that level. He was awesome in that stretch. 2010 to 2012 as well was a very good stretch for Matt Ryan. So Matt Ryan's had a lot of very good seasons. He's had several elite seasons in the NFL during this era. And this is, and keep in mind, the best quarterback era of all time. When we look at his statistics and where he's ranked among statistics by season, in terms of passing yards, he's finished first 0 times, finished in the top 5 8 times, and in the top 10 11 times. In touchdowns, never led the league, but finished top 5 3 times and top 10 8 times. In passer rating, he led the league once, finished top 5 3 times, and finished top 10 5 times. In completion percentage, led the league once, finished top 5 4 times, finished top 10 8 times. In yards per attempt, he finished first 1 time, top 5 twice, top 10 6 times. In fourth quarter comebacks, he finished first twice, top 5 7 times, and top 10 9 times. And in game-winning drives, finished first twice, top 5 6 times, and top 10 9 times. In terms of where he's graded among PFF, so you can get some unbiased sources here, unbiased statistics. If you don't want to take my word for it, just look at how he's ranked throughout the statistical categories I'm about to show you. So, according to PFF, he has been a top 5 quarterback 4 times and a top 10 quarterback 10 times. According to QBR, he's finished as the best quarterback in the league once in 2016, finished in the top 5 6 times and in the top 10 11 times, which he finished in the top 10 for the first 11 straight years of his career. In terms of EPA per play, he finished number 1 once, top 5 5 times, and top 10 9 times. In terms of CPOE, or completion percentage over expected, which is a very good accuracy measurement, he finished number 1 time, top 5 twice, and top 10 9 times. In terms of success rate, he finished as the best quarterback in the league once, in the top 5 times, and the top 10 9 times. In terms of adjusted net yards per attempt, he finished as the best quarterback in the league once, he finished in the top 5 3 times, and he finished in the top 10 7 times. In terms of DVOA, he finished as the best quarterback in the league once, he finished in the top 5 3 times, and he finished in the top 10 9 times. In terms of DYAR, he finished as the best quarterback in the league once, finished in the top 5 5 times, and finished in the top 10 10 times. Matt Ryan has consistently been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, with several seasons, with his 2016 season being a season that he was probably the best in the league from week 1 to Super Bowl. Several other seasons where he was top 5, and then for the majority of his career being a top 10 guy. When you look at the 2010s, so his decade obviously was primarily the 2010s. You look at how he ranked statistically, you look at the winning that he experienced, you look at his accolades. Very impressive stuff here for sure. You then look at his extended prime. So from 2010 to 2018, I would say this was his full prime. This was prime Matt Ryan. He won 82 games, which was 5th in that span. Threw for 40,364 yards, which is 2nd in that span. 257 touchdowns, 5th in that span. Interception percentage of about 2%, 5th in that span. Had a passer rating of about 96.6, which was 6th in that span. In completion percentage, he completed about 66%, 4th in that span. Had a yards per attempt of about 7.6, which was 8th in that span. An adjusted net yards per attempt of about 6.9, which was 7th in that span. In EPA, he finished 6th in that span. In success rate, he finished 5th. And in CPOE, he finished 8th. So as we can see in all of these statistics, Matt Ryan's finished in the top 8. So in the top quarter of the NFL through a 9-year sample size of the best passers in NFL history competing with him. That's really, really impressive, and it shows how consistently awesome Matt Ryan was throughout this stretch. And when you look at his absolute prime, and this is a fairly short period of time, but it shows where Ryan was throughout the best stretch of his career. From 2016 to 2018, he won 28 games, which is 6th in the league. 1,400 yards, threw for the most yards in that span. 93 touchdowns was also the most in that span. So from 2016 to 2018, Matt Ryan led the NFL in both yards and touchdowns. In interception percentage, about 1.5%, was fifth best in that span. Had about 106 passer rating, second in that span. Completed 68% of his passes, second in that span. Yards per attempt of about 8.3, which was the best in the league. And adjusted net yards per attempt of about 7.9, which was first in the league. In EPA, he finished second. In success rate, he finished second. And in CPOE, he finished third. So you could make a legitimate argument that Matt Ryan from 2016 to 2018 in his absolute prime was the best quarterback in the NFL. Look at the statistics. The wins also back it up. Ryan was excellent in his absolute peak, and he has been among the top quarterbacks in the most stacked quarterback positional era that the league has ever seen. Ryan has consistently been among the best, within his absolute prime arguably being the best. While it is true that quarterbacks impact winning, football is a team sport first and foremost, and you almost always need teammates to help you succeed with victories on the field. And how much support you had or didn't have throughout your career is certainly evaluated when looking at your Hall of Fame credentials. So let's look at Matt Ryan's support throughout his career. Let's see how his run games and offensive lines and receivers and tight ends and defenses and head coaches have been overall throughout his career. So, in terms of, before we get to his support, let's quickly look at his offenses and how they've performed. In terms of yards per drive, Ryan's offenses have performed stellar. I mean, they have averaged at about 7.8. He has led one number one offense in yards per drive, 6 top 5 offenses in yards per drive, and 11 top 10 offenses in yards per drive. Excellent offensive production from that standpoint. In terms of points per drive, Ryan's offenses have come in at about 9.7 on average. Again, 1 number 1 ranking, 3 top 5 rankings, and 10 top 10 rankings with Ryan. Slightly worse than yards per drive, simply because Ryan has actually struggled a bit in the red zone throughout his career. That's been one of his flaws, but overall still very productive from both a points and yards perspective. So Ryan's offenses have been consistently elite throughout his career. Let's look at Ryan's run games. Now, Ryan has played with very good running backs throughout his career, whether you look at Michael Turner or Devontae Freeman, but he's never had the number 1 run game in the league. He's had 1 top 5 run game and 3 top 10 run games. And really, an average of about 20th in the league with 3 bottom 5 run games throughout his career. 7 bottom 10 run games in his career. That's half his career. Ryan's run games have been below average throughout his career. Now he's had, as I said, he's had a couple big name running backs, but he hasn't had great run games overall from an efficiency standpoint. So Ryan's run support has been below average throughout his career. Now where his support has not been below average is from the receiver tight end standpoint. Ryan's had 17 Pro Bowl wide receiver / tight end seasons throughout his career, which is excellent. He's had 4 first-team All-Pro wide receiver / tight end seasons throughout his career. Very good. Julio Jones was a 7-time Pro Bowler and 2-time first-team All-Pro. Roddy White was a 4-time Pro Bowler and 1-time first-team All-Pro. Tony Gonzalez was a 4-time Pro Bowler and 1-time first-team All-Pro. Austin Hooper was a Pro Bowler, and Kyle Pitts was a Pro Bowler with Ryan. So that's excellent supporting cast there from a receiver / tight end standpoint. From an offensive line standpoint, it's been about average. So in terms of a pass blocking offensive line grade, according to PFF, Ryan's had 6 top 10 pass blocking offensive lines, but 0 top 5 or number 1 pass blocking offensive lines. He's had 5 Pro Bowl offensive lineman seasons. Alex Mack was a 3-time Pro Bowler. Tyson Clebeau was a 1-time Pro Bowler, and Jake Matthews was a 1-time Pro Bowler. None of these guys ended up making first-team All-Pro with Ryan. Ryan's offensive line support, again, about average overall, I would say. Not great, but not awful either. In terms of defenses, this is where we see awful. So from a yards per drive allowed perspective, Ryan has never had forget number one, top five, top 10. He's never even had a top half defense in yards per drive allowed. He's averaged at about 26th in the league, and he's had five bottom 10 or bottom five defenses in yards per drive allowed, which is awful. In points allowed per drive, it doesn't get much better. He does have two top 10 defenses here in 2010 and 2012, ranking 6th and 10th respectively. But outside of that, it's been pretty bad with five bottom five points allowed per drive defenses in his career, coming out to an average of about 21.7. Ryan's defensive support has just been terrible throughout his career, and it's really been, I think, a big reason for why he hasn't won a Super Bowl is because he's always consistently having to score 30 points to win. His defenses aren't putting him in positions to where he can kind of manage the game and win easier. And I think if you gave Ron defenses that Brady has had a lot of times during his career, that Ben Roethlisberger's had for several seasons throughout his career, that Russell Wilson had for the first 5 years of his career, Ron probably would have won a championship with the Falcons. But because his defenses have been so incompetent, it's been so tough to win at the highest level for the Falcons for Ryan. His defensive support has just been awful. From a head coach standpoint, Mike Smith was the head coach for the Falcons from 2008 to 2014. He was a good coach for a while, but I ultimately think just with where the league was going, it kind of passed his style by and eventually just kind of got stale and he kind of got figured out and he was fired from there. Dan Quinn had some success early on, got to a Super Bowl, obviously, but ultimately that relationship kind of soured and it didn't end very well there. He was fired in 2020. And Arthur Smith has just been 1 year with Ryan. So none of these guys are Hall of Famers as of yet. Arthur Smith may become one. There's a small chance that happens. But overall, none of these guys as of today are Hall of Famers. So Ryan's not had great coach support either. When we look at Hall of Famers, All Pros, and Pro Bowl teammates that Ryan's played with, the guys that I think Ryan has played with that will end up in gold jackets when it's all said and done are Julio Jones, John Abraham, Tony Gonzalez, and Alex Mack. These four players have been excellent standout players for their positions. Julio is one of the greatest receivers of all time. Gonzalez is arguably the greatest tight end of all time. Abraham's one of the more underrated defensive linemen of all time, I would say. And Alex Mack is one of the best centers of this century. All Pro teammates, Michael Turner, Roddy White, and Vic Beasley, and Pro Bowl teammates, Tyson Klebeau, Brent Grimes, William Moore, Thomas DeCowd, Desmond Trufant, Devontae Freeman, Deion Jones, Keanu Neal, Jake Matthews, Austin Hooper, Grady Jarrett, and Kyle Pitts. When we look at quarterbacks, and something that makes the great quarterbacks truly great is the ability to make very good players great, and good players very good, and solid players good, and below average players solid. That is something that Drew Brees has done throughout his entire career. That is something that Peyton Manning has done throughout his entire career. That is something Tom Brady has done throughout his entire career. That is what the great ones do throughout their careers. Dan Marino did this. Matt Ryan did this with a couple different players. So Roddy White. Roddy White was with the Falcons for 3 years before Matt Ryan was drafted to the team in 2008. So for the 3 years before Ryan, Roddy White's average was 47 catches for 718 yards and 3 touchdowns. With Matt Ryan on the team, 83 catches for 1,088 yards and 7 touchdowns. Roddy White was a very good receiver, and I love the guy, but Matt Ryan elevated him to great statistically. He was not great before Matt Ryan, and there's a reason that Roddy White's career took off once Matt Ryan came to the team. Matt Ryan elevated Roddy White. Matt Ryan also elevated Harry Douglas. In the 2013 season, Roddy White was getting older by this point. Julio Jones was injured throughout this entire season. Tony Gonzalez was getting older as well, so Ron was forced to play with receivers that just weren't very good, and he was forced to make these guys better. And that's exactly what he did with Harry Douglas. From 2009 to 2012, Harry Douglas averaged 31 catches for 383 yards and a touchdown. In 2013, 85 catches for 1,067 yards and 2 touchdowns. Matt Ryan made Harry Douglas a productive receiver in 2013. He carried him. And this was one of the more underrated kind of carry jobs, I think, from a quarterback to receiver that people just seem to not talk about. And I understand Matt Ryan's had excellent weapons throughout his career, and I'm not disputing that. But Matt Ryan's part of the reason that these guys have been as good as they've been statistically as well. It goes both ways. Nobody takes credit away from Peyton Manning because he had Marvin Harrison, or nobody takes credit away from Brady's 07 year because he had Randy Moss. Tom Brady never won an MVP without Randy Moss, Wes Welker, or Rob Gronkowski. Peyton Manning won 4 of his MVP awards, or Peyton Manning won all his MVP awards with Demaryius Thomas, Marvin Harrison, or Reggie Wayne. So we've got to be fair here when we talk about the weapons. Like, Ryan's had great weapons, but he's part of the reason for why they're great. And so Matt Ryan, overall team support, excellent weapons, solid offensive lines, slightly below average run games, pretty much average head coaches, and awful defenses. Matt Ryan is an NFL MVP, and he won that award in 2016. But I don't think people realize how great that season truly was. And as time has passed since he won that award, I've seen more and more lies pushed about this award and just more and more disrespect around this award. And this is one of the most disrespected MVP seasons, in my opinion, of all time in NFL history, just from both an NFL community perspective and from a voting perspective as a whole. And I'll start with the NFL community perspective, and I'll use my guy Mitch Mullaney at the Bottom Line View as an example. Go subscribe to Mitch. He's doing some great content. But Mitch, a couple years ago in December of 2019, was ranking the 10 MVP seasons of the 2010s from 1 to 10. And this is what he had to say about Matt Ryan's 2016 season.
Was the least impressive of all of these MVP campaigns, and I would give a lot of the respect to Kyle Shanahan and what he was able to do in this offensive scheme, putting Matt Ryan in a great position to execute this offense. And really, I would also argue that the MVP award should have gone to Aaron Rodgers or maybe even Tom Brady, who set the single-season touchdown-to-interception ratio record. Matt Ryan had a great year in 2017. I'm not trying to take anything away from him, and ultimately he had a great playoffs as well. But I just can't put him above anybody else on this list, and ultimately had the least impressive MVP campaign.
I'm not trying to take anything away from his season, but I'm also going to give a lot of the credit to Kyle Shanahan and say that 2 other quarterbacks deserve the award more than he did. This is reflected on the NFL MVP voting results, too. Tom Brady received 10 votes. Derek Carr and Ezekiel Elliott received 6 votes. Aaron Rodgers received 2 votes. And Dak Prescott received 1 vote in 2016 for the MVP. None of those guys deserved votes that year. Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott canceled each other out, in my opinion. Dak had an excellent, efficient rookie year, but his volume stats were nowhere near Ryan's. And at the end of the day, Ezekiel Elliott was a running back running behind the best offensive line in football. He's just nowhere near as valuable as Ryan is. In terms of the other quarterbacks, though, the guys that most commonly are argued for the award in Tom Brady, Derek Carr, and Aaron Rodgers, none of these guys deserve the award, and I'm about to get to why. Let's look at Matt Ryan's 2016 MVP season. So Matt Ryan in PFF grade finished second. In QBR finished first. In EPA finished first. In CPOE finished first. In success rate finished first. In yards per attempt finished first. In adjusted net yards per attempt finished first. In passer rating finished first. In completion percentage finished third. In DYAR finished first. In DVOA finished first. In touchdown to interception ratio had a 38 total touchdowns to 7 interceptions on the year, had 5,061 total yards on the year, and went 11-5. This is an outstanding statistical resume from Matt Ryan. Just the touchdown to interception ratio is great. Over 5,000 total yards. He laps the field in efficiency statistics. His record was great. He was the second greatest. I mean, it was just an outstanding season. It's a dominant season within a season, and it's not a season in which Matt Ryan was lucky to win the award. It was a season in which he deserved to win the award by finishing first in all these statistical categories. You look at his consistency that season. I'm showing his game log right here. Just insane week to week production here. I mean, look at this. I mean, you look at all the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games with at least 3 touchdowns. That's insane. He had look at the passer rating. Look at the completion percentage. Look at how consistent it was week to week for Matt Ryan that season. Matt Ryan was excellent in 2016 from a consistency standpoint, from a statistical standpoint. He was awesome. He was outstanding. You look at the 2016 Falcons offense. They finished 10th all-time in points per game. They finished 6th all-time in yards per play. Ryan broke the record. He broke a record for touchdowns to different players with 13 different players catching touchdowns that season. Ryan broke the single season record for yards per attempt, 9.3. He had 0 games with the yards per attempt under 7.9, which has never been replicated in NFL history. And it was just one of 7 seasons all time with 4,500 yards, 35 touchdowns, a 105 passer rating, and 8.5 yards per attempt. This is not lucky, guys. This is just simply excellent. Again, we are talking seasons that he broke records for yards per attempt statistics, touchdowns to different players statistics. He led his offense to top 10 all time in both yards per play and points per game. And he had one of 7 seasons all time with 4,500 yards, 35 touchdowns, a 105 rating, and an 8.5 yards per attempt. This is historically great. This is not just good relative to a weak season for quarterbacks. Don't give me that. That's just not true. When you compare Matt Ryan and Tom Brady's seasons in 2016, and Tom Brady is the one that is most commonly discussed as he should have won the award over Ryan, as he received the most votes. Tom Brady had an MVP level season in 2016 statistically. Of the 3 guys I'm about to show, he was the only one statistically really that I can say, yeah, okay, he had a great season. But Tom Brady, when you look at him versus Matt Ryan, Brady had the higher PFF grade, yes. Ryan had him beat in QBR, EPA or expected points added, CPOE, success rate, yards per attempt, adjusted net yards per attempt, passer rating, completion percentage, DYAR, DVOA, total yards. The only thing Brady had over Ryan that season was PFF grade, which is cool, but Ryan beats him in every other efficiency and statistical advanced metric that I gave you. So Ryan has a big advantage in that. Touchdown percentage is honestly, it went to Ryan that year. Ryan led the league in touchdown percentage that year. So Brady had him beat in interception percentage, which is cool. And Brady had a much higher win percentage. But when you look at the win percentage argument, first of all, it should be noted Brady missed 4 games due to suspension. And in those 4 games, the Patriots went 3-1. 3-1. They beat 2 playoff teams in the Houston Texans and Miami Dolphins. And when you look at the record that season, this can be chalked up to the fact that Ryan faced the 18th toughest strength of schedule this season, while Brady faced the weakest strength of schedule this season. That's right. The Patriots had the weakest strength of schedule of any team in the entire NFL in 2016. A lot of easy wins in there. So that record, a little bit inflated. In yards allowed per drive, Ryan's defense ranked 26th compared to Brady's 8th. In points allowed per drive, Ryan's defense ranked 28th, Brady's ranked 1st. Brady had a top 5 defense that year. Ryan had a bottom 7 defense that year. Ryan went 11-5 with that defense, with significant edges and statistics all over the board over Brady. Brady also had a much easier schedule, missed more games, and what? one more games because of an easier schedule, had a much better defense, all that stuff. Just Brady didn't have an argument this season. I don't know what his argument is. Is it touchdown interception ratio? At least Rodgers had some efficiency advantages over Brady that a lot this season. Brady doesn't have anything over Ryan this season. What does Brady have over him? EPA, CPOE, success rate, yards per attempt, adjusted net yards per attempt, rating, completion percentage, DYAR, DVOA, total yards, QBR. Nothing. Just PFF grade. That's not enough. So Matt Ryan was better than Tom Brady in the 2016 season. Brady didn't win the award not because he didn't play. Ryan won the award because he was the better player, and the statistics bear this out. So there's no argument for Tom Brady here. I don't know what his argument is here. Moving on to Derek Carr, who's the next guy. Again, Derek Carr had a great year in 2016. Great year, for sure. And he led the Raiders to 12-3. And you can see once he went out how drastically that team fell. And in terms of value, he was a very valuable player. But you have to have statistics to win the award too. And Matt Ryan was better than Derek Carr in PFF grade, QBR, EPA, CPOE, success rate, yards per attempt, adjusted net yards per attempt, passer rating, completion percentage, DYAR, DVOA. He was better in touchdown to interception ratio. He had more total yards. And he beat Derek Carr head to head, which is kind of the nail in the coffin there. No argument for Carr. And for Aaron Rodgers, Rodgers had a very good end to the season, a torrid end to the season statistically, throwing 18 touchdowns to no interceptions in his last, I think, 6 games. So excellent from Aaron Rodgers. But Aaron Rodgers was not great through the first 2.5 months of that 2016 season. He wasn't. That was actually one of the bigger storylines. It was, hey, what's wrong with Aaron Rodgers here? What's up? What's the deal here? He's usually a lead, and he's just not been this year. But he really turned it on towards the end of the year. Regardless, though, give me Matt Ryan, who was the more consistent quarterback throughout the entire stretch of the season, had the better record than Aaron Rodgers. Again, beats Aaron Rodgers in PFF grade, QBR, EPA, CPOE, success rate, yards per attempt, adjusted net yards per attempt, passer rating, completion percentage, DYAR, DVOA, total yards, had a better record, and beat Aaron Rodgers head to head during that season as the nail in the coffin and outplayed him, just like he outplayed Derek Carr. There's no comparison here for Aaron Rodgers. Tom Brady, Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers, they all had excellent seasons, right? They all had great seasons. Matt Ryan's season was just better, okay? People have to accept this. Like, there's no debate here over the 2016 MVP. It was clearly Matt Ryan. There was no argument to be made that any of these guys deserve the award over Matt Ryan this season. Matt Ryan's supporting cast this season was good. You look at Julio Jones was arguably the best receiver in the league. Outside of that, I mean, Mohamed Sanu was, he's a fine receiver too. Taylor Gabriel's a receiver 3. He's fine. That's not you're comparing that to Jordy Nelson, Devontae Adams, and Randall Cobb. That's not a huge, there's not much of a difference there in terms of receiving core. So Matt Ryan had significantly better numbers. And I understand Kyle Shanahan was great, but look, Kyle Shanahan never had a quarterback to put up near the numbers Matt Ryan did this season. And I've already went over the fact that Matt Ryan's had great seasons before this. Clearly isn't a Kyle thing. And Kyle Shanahan's a great offensive coordinator. But Kyle Shanahan was not the reason Matt Ryan was great in 2016. He was part of the reason, but the biggest reason Matt Ryan was great in 2016 was because Matt Ryan is a great player. I think the comparison here for Matt Ryan's 2016 MVP season is not anybody in that season, but it's Kurt Warner. And Kurt Warner and Matt Ryan are two awesome quarterbacks, obviously. But you look at the statistics from 2016 Matt Ryan and 2001 Kurt Warner, and you look at where they ranked. Both were number 1 in EPA, success rate, yards per attempt, adjusted net yards per attempt, passer rating. Now, Ryan was third in completion percentage. Warner did lead the league in that. But DYAR and DVOA both led the league. Ron had a 38-7 touchdown interception ratio. Warner had 36-22, so much higher interceptions for Warner. But keep in mind that was much less statistics heavy in 2001 compared to 2016, 15-year gap there. Total yards, Ron had 5,061. Warner had 4,858. Warner did go 14-2 to Ron. It's 11-5. So a little bit of a gap there. But overall, these were two of the most efficient seasons ever. These were two of the better quarterback seasons ever statistically. And they're two seasons that I think are awesome historically that should get more respect. And unfortunately, they both ended with Super Bowl losses to New England. And had they beaten New England in those Super Bowls, I think they would get a lot more historic respect. But both Ryan and Warner in 2016 and 2001 were great. And I think that's kind of the historical precedence you're looking at for Ryan's 2016 season. Not 2016 Brady, and it's not the least impressive season of the 2010s. 2014 Aaron Rodgers, 2017 Tom Brady, neither of those seasons hold a candle to 2016 Matt Ryan. I'm sorry. But so it's clearly not the least impressive season of the 2010s. I would put it up there with 01 Warner in terms of historical kind of comparison to where it ranks all time. So not, one of the greatest seasons ever, but towards that, like not too far off from that, a couple tiers below, but like a top of the third, mid third tier season all time for all time great quarterback seasons for sure. It's a great season historically, and people just have to start realizing that. Now I'm going to tackle some narratives about Matt Ryan's career that are completely false and just explain why they're awful arguments to make against him. So the first arguments that have really annoyed me for a while now, but regardless, they still get brought up all the time, is the fact that Matt Ryan was carried by Kyle Shanahan and had just one great season. Let's go through it. So Matt Ryan's 2012 season, he finished 7th in PFF grade, 4th in QBR, 3rd in EPA, 2nd in CPOE, 3rd in success rate, 6th in yards per attempt, 6th in adjusted net yards per attempt, 5th in passer rating, led the league in completion percentage, 5th in DYAR, 8th in DVOA, the total touchdowns 33, to 14 interceptions, 4,860 total yards, and the Falcons went 13-3, which was tied with Denver for the league lead in win-loss percentage. This was a great season. This is a top 5 quarterback season of 2012, and 2012 is not exactly a bad quarterback season either. I don't know if you recall, but Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, and Aaron Rodgers all had awesome seasons in 2012. But Matt Ryan was a top 5 quarterback of this season. He had great statistics. He did not have a great defense, and his team won at an extremely high rate. Matt Ryan was great in 2012, and this was 3 years before Kyle Shanahan stepped foot in Atlanta. So Matt Ryan was clearly great before Shanahan and had a great season before 2016. You also look after that. So 2018. In 2018, Matt Ryan, 9th in PFF grade, 9th in QBR, 4th in EPA, 6th in CPOE, 3rd in success rate, 7th in yards per attempt, 4th in adjusted net yards per attempt, 4th in passer rating, 4th in completion percentage, 4th in DYAR, 4th in DVOA, had 38 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, had 5,049 total yards, and went just 7-9, but keep in mind several very close losses in which he played very well in. So Matt Ryan in 2018 was an elite quarterback as well. He was, in my opinion, a top 5 guy. Maybe if he wasn't, he was just outside 6 or 7 that season. And he put up elite statistics, same total amount of touchdowns to interceptions. Just an outstanding season for Matt Ryan in 2018, and this was 2 years after Kyle Shanahan left and 2 years after his MVP season of 2016. Very similar statistics right here. So Matt Ryan has had multiple great seasons. He's had great seasons before Kyle Shanahan and before 2016 and after. So I don't understand this argument. It's like people just only focus on his 2016 season and just see the fact that he hasn't had quite the same amount of success as 2016 and every other season. So they just assume that he's only had one good season, which just makes no sense here. Matt Ryan was great in 2012 and he was great in 2018. And then you look at the 2 years with Kyle Shanahan versus the 2 years after Kyle Shanahan left. So in EPA, Matt Ryan under Kyle Shanahan was third compared to sixth without Kyle Shanahan. In CPOE, he was fifth in both 2 year stretches. In success rate, second under Kyle and fourth in the 2 years after Kyle. Yards per attempt, first under Kyle and sixth in the 2 years after Kyle. Second in adjusted net yards per attempt under Kyle and sixth after Kyle. In passer rating, second under Kyle and eighth after Kyle. Completion percentage, fourth for each. In touchdown to interception ratio, 59 total touchdowns to 23 interceptions under Kyle, and 58 touchdowns to 19 total interceptions after Kyle. So actually slightly better touchdown interception ratio there. In total yards, 9,715 under Kyle compared to 9,287 after Kyle left. And the win-loss record, just 2 wins better with Kyle than without Kyle. Matt Ryan was a better quarterback with Kyle Shanahan than he's ever been, and that's clear to say. And Kyle Shanahan is an awesome offensive mind, as I've said before. There's no doubt that he helped elevate Matt Ryan, but Matt Ryan was great before and after Shanahan, and he didn't need to prove anything. Matt Ryan is a great quarterback regardless, and as you can see, there's not a huge difference here. Matt Ryan, the guy on the left, is clearly better, but it's not huge. It's not a huge gap here. And even in the touchdown interception rate, it's very similar to the 2016 Ron versus 2016 Brady, with Ryan having a higher touchdown interception ratio, but under Kyle doing everything else better. Very similar to that. So Matt Ryan was awesome with and without Kyle, and just factually, this is what's happened. So I've never understood this argument. It's clearly not true. The next narrative about Ryan is the fact that he's a dome quarterback and has gotten a lot of his stats in garbage time in losses. So the first narrative is the garbage time narrative, and this is just simply factually incorrect. Ryan has thrown for more yards and touchdowns in wins than losses in his career. This should be pretty simple enough to explain why this narrative's dumb. Okay, moving on. I have compiled a list here, another list of garbage time narratives that is just it just bothers me here. So on the left is Matt Ryan's 2018 season, and on the right is Drew Brees, the average of his 4 seasons that he went 7-9 during his career with the Saints. Let's look at the statistics. So Matt Ryan has Brees beat in yards per attempt, adjusted net yards per attempt, passer rating, completion percentage, touchdown interception ratio, total yards. Their offenses were the same in terms of average yards per drive ranking. Ryan's was actually a little better in points per drive. Defensively, both were awful, and they both went 7-9 during these seasons. Ryan's statistics were better, but Ryan is for some reason labeled as a garbage time quarterback, while Brees is hailed as an elite quarterback during these seasons. Can we get some consistency here? Either they're both thriving in garbage time, or they're just both elite regardless of their subpar team records. I personally lean towards the latter, but make up your mind here. Be consistent, okay? And then as for the dome quarterback narrative, I've compared Matt Ryan to 2 of the greatest quarterbacks of all time here, Peyton Manning and Drew Brees, and I've compared his splits from indoor to outdoor with Peyton Manning and Drew Brees over their careers. So red indicates a regression in the statistic, and green indicates that they actually get better in the statistic. So Peyton Manning from indoor to outdoor, his completion percentage goes down by 0.6%. His yards per game goes up actually by 8.9. His yards per attempt goes down by 0.4. His touchdown percentage goes down by 2.8%. His interception percentage goes up by 0.1%, and his passer rating drops by 5.1 points. Peyton gets a little bit worse statistically, but not too noticeable. Drew Brees, completion percentage goes down 4.4%. Yards per game goes down a huge 56.3 yards. Yards per attempt goes down a full yard. Touchdown percentage down 1.2%. Interception percentage up 0.2%. And passer rating falls 12.1 points. Drew Brees is significantly affected from indoor to outdoor during his career. He's much better indoors than outdoors. And so if we're doing this whole dome quarterback narrative with Matt Ryan, can we get some consistency here with Drew Brees? And for Matt Ryan, completion percentage falls by 2.7%, yards per game falls by 2.4 yards, yards per attempt falls by half a yard, touchdown percentage falls by 0.5%, interception percentage actually gets better. It falls actually 0.3%, and passer rating falls by about 4.9 points. So Ryan and Peyton are basically affected the same from indoor to outdoor. Both slightly get worse, and Brees is significantly worse. So if we're going to call Matt Ryan a dome quarterback who can't play outdoors, can we get some consistency with Peyton Manning and especially Drew Brees here? That's all I'm asking for. All quarterbacks are judged by their playoff performance, as the playoffs are the most important element to football in terms of when it comes to winning a Super Bowl, and that is where your money's worth. And while it's not everything, it certainly means something in terms of the Hall of Fame. So Matt Ryan, in terms of when it comes to winning in the playoffs, he is 4-6 all time, which is about a 40% win rate. 4 playoff wins, which is tied for 12th all time. No Super Bowls, 1 Super Bowl appearance, 2 conference championship appearances, 3 one-and-dones, and his only losses, and this is a fun stat, his only losses have come to teams that have made the Super Bowl. So 2008 against the Cardinals, 2010 against the Packers, 2011 against the Giants, 2012 against the 49ers, 2016 was in the Super Bowl against the Patriots, and 2017 against the Philadelphia Eagles. All those teams made the Super Bowl. So a couple of them won it. So that's a very interesting stat. In terms of Ryan's playoff statistics, he has thrown for 2,672 yards, which is 24th all time. Yards per game, he is at 267.2, which is 13th all time. In terms of touchdowns, he has thrown 20, which is tied for 19th all time. In terms of touchdown percentage, 5.7%, which is tied for 11th all time. Interception percentage, 2%, which is 9th best all time. His completion percentage is at 67.5%, which is 2nd all time. His yards per attempt is at 7.6, which is tied for 17th all time. His adjusted net yards per attempt is at 6.92, which is tied for 13th all time. His passer rating's at 100.8, which is 5th all time. He has 1 comeback and 1 game-winning drive in the playoffs during his career. Some very impressive playoff stats here for sure for Matt Ryan, despite the somewhat lackluster record. This is personally my favorite. The narrative that Matt Ryan is a choker. and we know where this narrative stems from, and I'll get to that game eventually. But first of all, when it comes to Matt Ryan and you look at his statistics in the playoffs, as I went through, his yards per game slightly goes down compared to the regular season by 2 yards. His touchdown percentage gets better. His interception percentage gets better. His completion percentage gets better. His yards per attempt gets a little better. His adjusted net yards per attempt gets a little better. And his passer rating gets quite a bit higher, actually. Ryan's playoff statistics considerably get better than his regular season statistics. And this is not common either. Like Aaron Rodgers' playoff statistics get worse. Peyton Manning's playoff statistics got worse. Tom Brady's playoff statistics even got worse. But Matt Ryan's gets better. Yet Matt Ryan is labeled as a choker. I don't understand this because statistically, Matt Ryan has played better in the bigger games in the playoffs. In terms of fourth quarter comebacks and game-winning drives when it comes to being clutch, again, Ryan, 33 comebacks of all time, 42 game-winning drives all time. Both are tied for 7th all time. He's led the league in each respective statistic twice during his career. And he did have a clutch reputation at Boston College due to that 2007 game against Virginia Tech. Go watch it on YouTube. But overall, Matt Ryan has been clutch throughout his career when it comes to fourth quarter comebacks and game-winning drives. Now, what I'm going to get into here is the two black marks on Matt Ryan's playoff legacy in terms of blown leads: the 2012 NFC title game and Super Bowl 51. Before we get into those games, though, I do want to go over Matt Ryan's 2016 playoffs because it truly was special. He threw for 1,014 yards, which is 13th all-time for a single postseason, 338 yards per game, 9 touchdowns, which is tied for 8th all-time for a single postseason, 9.2 touchdown percentage. He had a 71.4 completion percentage, which is 25th all-time for a single postseason, 10.3 yards per attempt, which is 14th all-time, 10.7 adjusted net yards per attempt, 12th all-time, a 135.3 passer rating, 7th all-time, and he is one of 6 players to throw for 1,000 yards in 3 playoff games. So Matt Ryan's 2016 playoffs were truly special. The 2012 Nfc Championship is where we'll start here, and in this game, Matt Ryan was 30 of 42, which is a 71.4 completion percentage. He threw for 396 passing yards, 9.4 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns to 1 interception. He did lose 1 fumble, had a 114.8 passer rating, 83.4 QBR, and the Falcons blew a 17-0 lead to lose 28-24. And I'm going to take you through a couple crucial moments in this game and kind of dissect where it went wrong for the Falcons and if Ryan does deserve the blame. So, without further ado, let's get to moment number 1.
Jones with a record-setting day on the outside for Atlanta, 158 receiving yards. 3rd down and 2. Ryan floats one. He's got Douglas. And Douglas makes the catch. The 49ers sideline says that ball hit the ground. Douglas was stumbling.
So as you can see, Matt Ryan hit Harry Douglas for the first down. But Harry Douglas could have gone to the end zone. There was no Niners back there. He had open space completely. It was a good throw by Ryan. It wasn't thrown to where Douglas had to slow down or anything. Douglas just straight up slipped on that play. And while he did convert for the first down, it could have been a touchdown. And given the fact that the Niners didn't score for the rest of the game and it just stayed at 28-24, Atlanta could have won the game had Douglas literally not slipped. And you cannot blame Ryan for this. Harry Douglas just straight up slips on this play. And had he not slipped, he would have scored a touchdown, and the Falcons probably would have won the game. So this is not Matt Ryan's fault. This is Harry Douglas completely on him for just slipping and messing this up. And while he did convert the first down, it could have been a touchdown to win the game. Now to the other crucial moment in this game.
Fourth down and 4. Ryan. Pass is broken up. There are no flags. And the 49ers will take over up by 4.
So, as you just heard excitedly from Joe Buck, there are no flags on the play. On 4th down, the Falcons failed to convert, and the Niners ended up winning the NFC Championship. Now, this is clearly pass interference. Navarro Bowman is grabbing Roddy White's jersey. It's pass interference here on this play, and the Falcons should have a fresh set of downs close, within at like the 49ers 5-yard line. And in all likelihood, this play sent the Niners to the NFC Championship instead of the Falcons. Had the PI gotten called, the Falcons would have been at about the Niners 5-yard line. The Falcons likely score the touchdown just 5 yards away, and the Falcons win the game in all likelihood. Then the Falcons are the ones that are playing the Ravens in the Super Bowl instead of the 49ers. You can't blame Ryan for this, man. You can't blame Ryan for a missed call. And the Falcons didn't make enough of a scene about it like their counterparts from New Orleans did about 6 years later. But this was a missed call, and at the end of the day, because of this, Matt Ryan didn't get a chance to go to the Super Bowl. Matt Ryan does not deserve the blame for this. While he did throw an interception and fumble in the second half, he played well enough to win for sure. He actually played really well in this game, and the reason the Falcons lost was because of Harry Douglas slipping and because of a missed call from the refs. Definitely not on Matt Ryan here. Now to the infamous Super Bowl 51. In this game, Matt Ryan was 17 of 23 for 73.9 completion percentage, 284 yards, 12.3 yards per attempt, which was fourth all time in Super Bowls, 2 touchdowns to no interceptions with 1 fumble lost, a 144.1 rating, which was fourth all time, a QBR of 81, and the Falcons blew, of course, the famous 28-3 lead. And just like in the 2012 NFC title game, there are several key moments that decided the outcome of this game, and I'll take you through them, and I'll kind of describe them, and we'll see if Matt Ryan is to blame here.
Out of the shotgun, Ryan gets hit. Ball is out. This is a fumble. New England has it.
It looked like Devontae Freeman should have picked him up. He doesn't block him, and Matt Ryan, because he's expecting Hightower to be blocked, he's looking the opposite way, and Hightower makes a big-time play right here and getting the ball loose on Matt Ryan.
So that play was a sack and a fumble, a strip sack from Dante Hightower on Matt Ryan. But Matt Ryan is blameless here, honestly. There is nothing Matt Ryan could have done in this situation. There was no one to throw the ball to. Everybody was tightly covered. And Ryan was trying to throw the ball away, but Hightower got there so quickly because Devontae Freeman completely whiffed on the block. And because Devontae Freeman completely whiffed on the block, Ryan didn't even have enough time to get the ball out. Tom Brady, the same thing would have happened to Tom Brady or Drew Brees in this situation. I don't care how quick your release is. There is literally no time here to throw the ball away. And Matt Ryan has a fairly quick release. So this is not on Matt Ryan at all. This is on Devontae Freeman for completely failing to block Dante Hightower at all. And it's also on Kyle Shanahan and Dan Quinn for running the ball on for not running the ball on 3rd and 1. You're playing against the clock here. There's 8.5 minutes left. You're in a 3rd and 1 situation here. You have a good run game. I know you haven't been too effective, but you have a good run game. Just run the ball. Keep the ball on the ground. Try and kill some clock here. And get a couple more first downs on the drive. Get a field goal and just completely end this. The Falcons failed to do that because Kyle Shanahan and Dan Quinn decided to get cute here. And this would cost them later in the game, as we will see. The Falcons seemed to rot the ship a bit after the Patriots scored to make it 28-20. It felt as though the momentum was all with New England, as Atlanta was just completely at a loss to how this game had gotten to one possession, but Ryan answered back quickly as he had done all season. First completing a huge play to Devontae Freeman before making an excellent throw to Julio Jones, where Ryan evaded pressure and Julio made an awesome catch. The Falcons had the ball at the Patriots 22. They ran the ball on 1st and 10 for a loss of 1 before this play happened.
Ryan is sacked. What a play. Trey Flowers.
Again, you cannot blame Matt Ryan here. The protection breaks down immediately, and he barely has time to get a throw off. Maybe you can blame a little bit that he doesn't throw the ball away, but how much, really? Like, there's barely any time to throw the ball away. You guys don't understand how quickly the pressure got there on that play. And the reason the reason that play happened in the first place is because Kyle Shanahan and Dan Quinn decided not to run the ball, even though they were up 8 points, playing against the clock, with an all-pro field goal kicker. All they needed to do was run the ball, kick a field goal, win the game. It's over. You win the Super Bowl. Instead, they decide to get cute and they decide to throw the ball, and it costs them. Ryan takes a sack. And it's not Matt Ryan's fault that he took a sack. The blame for this play is on Kyle Shanahan and Dan Quinn, not Matt Ryan. I'm sorry. It's just not. Great play by Trey Flowers, but ultimately this falls on Kyle Shanahan and Dan Quinn.
3 points is big right now in this ball game.
A loss of 12 on that sack. Pass is caught, Sanu, and that's exactly what happened. A flag is down back in the area where Matt Ryan went down, and we'll check the call.
Holding, number 70 offense, 10-yard penalty, replay third down.
This was a backbreaker for the Falcons. That just horrendous penalty for Jake Matthews to take here. Got them out of field goal range after a completed Ryan pass. You can't blame Ryan here. It's on Jake Matthews, obviously. And just you could feel it slipping away from the Falcons' grasp at this point.
Here's Edelman broken up, and the pass is no sign yet. Edelman comes down with a football, and they're saying it's a catch. Alford knocked it up into the air, and let's see who comes down with it. Oh, that's a catch.
Oh, my God.
That's incredible.
That's amazing concentration by Julian Edelman to be able to make a play on
Atlanta
that.
is challenging the ruling on the field of a completed pass. We'll review the play.
The ball was resting on the arm of Ricardo Allen, and Edelman able to re-grab it before he hits the ground. I checked with Mike Pereira in our booth. He thinks it's a catch, and the play's being challenged by Atlanta.
And it should have been an interception by Robert Alford.
This might have been the most unbelievable play of them all, man. Tom Brady throws it right up to Robert Alford, who has a free game-sealing interception to win the game. And he somehow drops it, falls into a pile of 3 Falcons and 1 Julian Edelman. Yet Julian Edelman is the one that makes the catch. To have, of course, Matt Ryan's not to blame here, but the fact that this goes against Matt Ryan is insane. It's insane. The fact that this was a completion was insane to me. So, okay, that's it for Super Bowl 51. Patriots went on, scored a touchdown, converted the 2-point conversion, won the overtime coin toss, and scored in overtime to win 34-28. Ryan never touched the ball again outside of one drive that was deep inside his own territory that was basically meaningless. The Falcons lost Super Bowl 51. Matt Ryan lost Super Bowl 51, but to hold Super Bowl 51 over Matt Ryan's head, if you're blaming him at all for this loss, it's just completely stupid. It's astronomically stupid to be blaming Matt Ryan for this loss. Ryan was great in this game. He thoroughly outplayed the greatest quarterback of all time for a majority of the game. He had the 4th highest Super Bowl passer rating and yards per attempt of all time. And the plays that resulted in it took a series of just unfortunate events for him to lose this game. And had he won this game, he'd be a lock for Cannon. But the fact is, he dealt with a series of some of the most unlucky plays I've ever seen in this game. Between the Edelman catch and Shanahan just deciding not to run the ball and Quinn deciding not to run the ball. Falcons secondary not making any plays when the Patriots were mounting their comeback. The Jake Matthews holding penalty, the Devontae Freeman whiff block, just all of that mounted into one. You cannot blame Matt Ryan after all of that. Matt Ryan was awesome in this game. He was great in this game. So just don't hold it over his head. He was awesome in the game. He deserves zero blame for this loss. If anything, it should enhance his legacy because he played in a great Super Bowl. Obviously, it doesn't because he lost. But it's not Matt Ryan's fault he lost at all. Over his 14-year career, Matt Ryan has set a number of NFL records. If you look at it, Matt Ryan has the most wins through the first 5 years of his career of any quarterback in NFL history. He has the most consecutive games with at least 200 passing yards in NFL history. He has the most yards through 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 seasons of any player in NFL history. He has the most completions by a quarterback in their first 9 seasons. He is the only quarterback to have himself and a wide receiver go for 500 and 300 yards in a game with Julio Jones. He's the only quarterback to throw a touchdown pass to 13 different wide receivers in a single season, 2016. He has the most yards per attempt in a single season in NFL history, which is 9.3 in 2016. He has at least 7.9 yards per attempt in all 16 games of the season in 2016, which is an NFL record, and he has every Falcons passing record. Pretty impressive list of records for Matt Ryan. Hall of Fame caliber records, no doubt. I'm going to compare Matt Ryan's current resume to that of a couple other players that are in the Hall of Fame, starting off with Warren Moon. So Warren Moon was a 9-time Pro Bowler. He was the 1990 Offensive Player of the Year. Matt Ryan has made 5 Pro Bowlers. He's also won an Offensive Player of the Year. He was an All-Pro and an MVP and an Offensive Rookie of the Year, which is something that Moon has never done or never did do. Statistically, Moon was a little more dominant in his era, but you have to factor in the fact that his era did feature weaker quarterback play. Matt Ryan had a better overall win-loss record in the regular season. Matt Ryan had more playoff wins. Matt Ryan had much better playoff statistics. So overall, Matt Ryan and Warren Moon, very comparable here. Moon has more Pro Bowls. Moon has more statistical dominance, I would say, for his era, but Ryan has more accolades, I would say, overall. And I would also say Ryan has more from a winning perspective. So overall, pretty even between Matt Ryan and Warren Moon, and Warren Moon made it to the Hall of Fame. As for Matt Ryan and Jim Kelly, who's the other guy I'm going to compare Matt Ryan to, Kelly also was a 5-time Pro Bowler and 1-time All-Pro, just like Ryan. In terms of, they both led the league in completion percentage once. They both Kelly did lead the league in touchdowns, which Ryan never did. Kelly did lead the league in passer rating, just like Ryan, but Kelly also led the league in interceptions. Ryan was more dominant from a comeback and game-winning drive sense, slightly. And overall, Ryan has an MVP. Ryan has an All-Pro, which Kelly doesn't have. But Kelly does have a much better win-loss record. Kelly does have more playoff wins, and Kelly has made it to 4 Super Bowls compared to Ryan's 1. But they were both kind of viewed as second-tier quarterbacks, right? So Matt Ryan has always kind of been viewed as the bridesmaid to Brady and Peyton and Rodgers. And Kelly was kind of the same thing with guys like Elway and Marino and Steve Young, Brett Favre, and guys like that. So both of them are kind of the same. And Jim Kelly made it to the Hall of Fame with a much shorter career. I would expect Matt Ryan with a very similar career to get that same sort of consideration that Jim Kelly did. Now comparing Ryan to some of his current contemporaries, starting off with Phillip Rivers. Rivers and Ryan is a very interesting discussion because they're very similar, but each has a couple things that the other doesn't. So Rivers and Ryan each have a 3-year stretch in their careers where you can argue they were the best quarterback in the league. And statistically they were. Rivers from 2008 to 2010 and Ryan from 2016 to 2018. Both of them are going to play for a very long time. Now, Rivers currently has higher career totals than Ryan, but Ryan will more than likely pass Rivers in terms of yards and touchdowns by the end of his career or so. At least I would assume so if he plays another 3 seasons. Ryan does have an MVP and an All Pro and an Offensive Player of the Year and an Offensive Rookie of the Year, which Rivers does not have. But Rivers has 8 Pro Bowls to Ryan's 5. Rivers also has a higher win-loss percentage than Ryan does career-wise. Rivers has one more playoff win. But in terms of playoff performance, Ryan's playoff performance has been much higher than Rivers. Whereas Rivers is a guy that's kind of struggled in the playoffs for his entire career and always just kind of underperformed. Ryan hasn't. In fact, statistically, he's overperformed in the playoffs compared to the regular season. Ryan has played better. Ryan has played well in 2 conference title games compared to Rivers' 0. Ryan's even made it to a Super Bowl on the back of his right arm and has played really well in a Super Bowl, which Rivers never even made it to. But Rivers right now has the longevity and has the Pro Bowls over Ryan. So very interesting there, and has the winning in terms of the regular season over Ryan. So it's very interesting between Matt Ryan and Phillip Rivers. I do think it's kind of a package deal. I think it's more likely that by the end of his Matt Ryan's career, he probably surpasses Phillip Rivers just in terms of accolades, and then the statistics will eventually pass Rivers. But it's a very interesting question. I think it's very likely that both of them make it to the Hall of Fame at some point. Eli Manning is very different to Matt Ryan. Eli Manning has 2 Super Bowl MVPs. Matt Ryan has 0. Eli has that big edge. But Eli Manning was nowhere near as consistent as Matt Ryan was. He was not as good of a quarterback as Matt Ryan was. He's not as accomplished as Matt Ryan was. And even statistically in the playoffs, he's not as good as Matt Ryan was. He didn't win as high of a rate in the regular season as Matt Ryan did. And, his statistics are nowhere close to Matt Ryan's. So Eli Manning, I think, probably gets in before Matt Ryan because his last name's Manning and because of how iconic those 2 Super Bowl wins are. But if I were doing it, I certainly would put Matt Ryan above Eli Manning. And Matt Ryan and Matt Stafford is the last comparison I kind of wanted to do here. And this is a really interesting one because as of right now, I don't think it's much of an argument in terms of Matt Ryan's career has been more successful and better than Matthew Stafford, even with the Super Bowl now for Stafford. You look at the statistics, Ryan's just been a little bit better than Stafford statistically throughout their respective careers. He's played a little bit longer, and he's been a little bit more accomplished from Pro Bowls and All-Pros perspective. Ryan has that MVP, All-Pro, more Pro Bowls than Stafford does. But Stafford does have the Super Bowl, which Ryan does not have. I do think that with the current trajectory of the Rams and Stafford's career overall, by the time Stafford retires and he probably beats out Ryan for some of those numbers, Stafford may end up retiring with the better career than Matt Ryan. But as of right now, I don't think you can really argue Stafford's had a better career than Ryan through just one Super Bowl trumping everything. I don't think that's fair. I think Ryan and the totality of his career outweighs Stafford. So Matt Ryan, I think, compares pretty well historically and currently to his contemporaries. So the question still remains, will Matt Ryan get into Canton? Will Matt Ryan make the Pro Football Hall of Fame? So, of quarterbacks that have Matt Ryan's accolades of 5 Pro Bowls and 1 first-team All-Pro, at least both of these, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Brett Favre, Johnny Unitas, Aaron Rodgers, Fran Tarkenton, Dan Marino, Joe Montana, Bob Greasy, Len Dawson, Steve Young, Jack Kemp, Dan Fouts, John Hadel, Jim Kelly, Sonny Jurgensen, Joe Namath, and Daryl LaMonica. 20 players. 14 of these guys are enshrined in canon. 3 of these guys, Brady, Brees, Rodgers, will eventually be enshrined in canon. And Jack Kemp, John Hadel, and Daryl LaMonica, for some reason, have not been. I think with Matt Ryan and the amount of yards and touchdowns he will have accumulated throughout his career, that's going to be way more than LaMonica or Kemp or Hadel. That'll certainly get him some recognition in terms of that. So I think Matt Ryan, in terms of this, has a pretty good shot when you're just judging it by that. When you look at career approximate value, which is exactly what it sounds like, it is a Pro Football Reference statistic, and it judges how valuable you are to your NFL team. Matt Ryan is currently 16th all time in career approximate value. And of the top 15, every single player will be a Hall of Famer or is already a Hall of Famer. Everybody above Matt Ryan, and Ryan still has a couple years left to keep moving up on the list and potentially even move into the top 10. So Matt Ryan, I think for sure can, cement himself as a Hall of Famer according to approximate value. And judging by this, again, he will be a Hall of Famer. Pro Football Reference also has a Hall of Fame monitor, which factors in AV, Pro Bowls, All Pros, championships, and a lot more into, the likeliness that a quarterback gets into the Hall of Fame. And Ryan currently ranks in at 12th in terms of their Pro Football Hall of Fame monitor. And notable Hall of Fame quarterbacks below Matt Ryan according to their monitor: Bart Starr, Terry Bradshaw, Roger Staubach, Dan Fouts, Kurt Warner, Joe Namath, Ken Stabler, Sonny Jurgensen, Bob Greasy, Warren Moon, Len Dawson, Troy Aikman, and Jim Kelly. So let's answer the two questions that everybody has on their mind. Should Matt Ryan be a Hall of Famer, and will Matt Ryan be a Hall of Famer? Well, given everything I've said in this video, Matt Ryan checks off the longevity. He has already played 14 seasons, and he will likely play about 17, which is more than enough longevity to get into the Hall of Fame. He'll have the statistics both within his era and in his career, as I've explained both throughout this video. He will have the accolades with an MVP, an All-Pro, multiple Pro Bowls, an Offensive Player of the Year, an Offensive Rookie of the Year, and multiple records both in the NFL and franchise. And when it comes to winning, that is the one box he hasn't quite checked off yet. Had he won that Super Bowl, it would have completely been checked off. But because of that, it's still just there's still just a dash there. I do hope that Matt Ryan gets his Super Bowl one day. And I know his days in the NFL are numbered at this point, but I do hope he gets it before he retires. But I still think with everything he'll have achieved throughout his career, Matt Ryan should be an NFL Hall of Famer. And I also believe Matt Ryan will be an NFL Hall of Famer. At the end of the day, a lot of Hall of Fame voters will look at his total stats and just go, yep, he's a Hall of Famer. He will have the accolades. He will have the MVP season. He will have the Pro Bowls. He will have the All-Pro. He will have the era dominance and the longevity dominance of it. And he still will have made a Super Bowl and have played well in there. So I think Matt Ryan should be a Hall of Famer, and Matt Ryan will be a Hall of Famer. That is episode 1 of Hall of Fame debates. I've got a couple more on my mind on if they should and if they will be Hall of Famers. Got a couple more players on my mind. Suggest some more players that you want me to see do down below in the comment section. And also tell me if you think Matt Ryan should be a Hall of Famer and if Matt Ryan will be a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and God bless.